Welcome to episode 6 of the Backseat Fighter podcast. Today, we're going to switch it up a little bit. First, we have a discussion about the biggest debate in MMA right now, Jon Jones versus Jon Aspinall, but more specifically about the term casual being thrown around between fans debating this topic. And then I'm going to get into my reactions to all the fights at UFC Macau on the main card, obviously starting with the main event between Peter Yan and Deiveson Figueiredo. Let's get straight into it. So let's get into this discussion very, very quickly. I mean, Jon Jones beat Stipe Miocic last week. Thank you for all the support on the content on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube Shorts, and obviously on the episode. When we went through that fight, I talked about how great Jon Jones was, how he looked like he was just back to his old light heavyweight GOAT self, the vintage creativity of Jon Jones to use that spinning back kick, to use the teeps up the middle to the stomach, to be attacking with the oblique kick to the lead leg of Stipe Miocic, you know, those leg kicks, just mixing it up perfectly like he used to back in his pomp, back in his prime in light heavyweight. And of course, we spoke up a little bit about the narrative that Stipe Miocic didn't look like himself. You know, he didn't look like the heavyweight GOAT that was, used in media. Now, I definitely, in my predictions before that fight, said, you know what, I think Stipe is going to be good. I think the layoff is going to be good for him in terms of not having the damage taken, and he did look good physically. So I thought, we were going to see definitely not a prime Stipe Miocic, but a Stipe Miocic that was going to get in there and give Jon Jones at least a bit more of a competitive fight. But that doesn't discredit Stipe. All credit goes to Jon Jones for that fight and amazing performance by him. But along the entire build up to that fight in the months prior, when the fight originally fell out, Jon Aspinall becomes interim heavyweight champion by knocking out Pavlovich in Madison Square Garden, and he then is the next in line, right? Obviously, we wait for this legacy fight between these two greats in Stipe and Jon, and Jon Aspinall's name is very, very relevant in this story. He's waiting on the sidelines. He wants Jon Jones after Jon Jones wins this fight, and now, during the whole build-up, Jon Jones was saying, I don't want to fight Jon Aspinall. I'd rather fight Alex Pereira. And then he started talking about Derek Lewis and Jamal Hill. But we really knew, at least many of us thought so, that Jon Jones was negotiating with the UFC. And eventually, in his post-fight interview, he says, I might give you what you guys want, which is the Jon Aspinall fight. But he definitely wants that FU money, as he put it, to fight Tom. And that makes sense because Tom is the most dangerous fighter he'll have ever faced, especially when you consider that Jon is 37. Tom, I think, is 30 or 31. He's a huge heavyweight. He's bigger than Jon. He's faster than Jon. And he's well-rounded. So it offers a big threat. So that's kind of the background of the debate, right? And a lot of people rush to Jon Jones' side saying, Jon is the GOAT. He can do whatever he wants. Stop saying he needs to fight Jon Aspinall. Listen, if Jon Jones were to walk away today and put a tweet out said, I'm never lacing up the gloves again, or I'm never putting on the UFC gloves ever again, I'm walking, I'm done, I'm never going to perform inside the octagon, I would wish him well because he doesn't owe us anything in that sense. If he was going to retire, well wishes. Nobody should be forced to fight if they don't want to, and especially in a case like Jon Jones where they don't have to financially. But Jon Jones very quickly turned away from the idea of retirement leading up to that fight, and obviously post-fight, he doesn't want to retire. He still wants more fights. And if he's going to stick around, especially at heavyweight, he needs to fight Jon Aspinall because there's still questions at heavyweight for Jon Jones. Nobody should be questioning Jon Jones as a mixed martial artist. Nobody should even necessarily be questioning his eagerness to fight or if he's afraid of Jon Aspinall. I don't think afraid is the right word because Jon Jones is one of the baddest men on the planet. If you put a group of men in most rooms, including Jon Jones in that group, he's probably the guy walking out. He's the baddest man on the planet right now, and I truly believe that he's not afraid of Jon Aspinall. I do believe, because Jon Jones is a smart man and especially a smart fighter, that he realizes that Jon Aspinall is a huge threat, and that's why he's negotiated this way with the UFC to make them have to pay him 40 million perhaps. I saw MMA Guru with Mighty Mouse Johnson talking about that. Should they drop the biggest bag ever to get Jon Jones to fight Jon Aspinall? And I think they should. I completely agree in that sense. But let's get into why I think Tom Aspinall deserves that fight, or they should fight, and then we'll talk about the fan stuff. Tom Aspinall is one of the most generational fighters I've ever seen. And I really want to stray away from sensationalist vocabulary like that, because this is not the purpose of this platform. That is for big national media to do that, to do the hot takes, to do the sensationalist language. That's not what we're here for. We're here to truly analyze in the most JJ Redick, LeBron James, mind the game-esque way, in terms of fighting, at least, not in basketball like they did. But I really want to be clear. When I say this, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm not trying to exaggerate. I'm not trying to get views or clickbait. Tom Aspinall is different at heavyweight because he has the size of a heavyweight, a big heavyweight too, but he's fast and he's well-rounded and he's knocking people out in the first or second round. He has the shortest average fight time in UFC history. He's the interim champion. He's defended that belt. But you have to understand, he's not even been raised a striker necessarily. I think his background is jiu-jitsu. He started rolling in adult jiu-jitsu classes when he was a kid because there weren't any available kids classes at the time. So this is a guy who's been obviously grown into a heavyweight frame. But even when he was training at heavyweight during those first couple of UFC fights, I don't believe he even had any heavyweight sparring partners. So that's where he kind of developed his speed from kind of sparring and training with smaller guys. And I think that's what Jon Jones realizes, right? Jon Jones, in every fight he's had, especially most fights, I think maybe I could point to Gustafsson 1 where he didn't necessarily have a physical advantage, both because Gustafsson was in his prime and, was a similar size to Jon, but Jon obviously wasn't training during that training camp. And, in some ways, thank you, because that was one of the best fights of all time. But Jon Jones always has a physical advantage in the octagon. He's always either the taller person, longer reach, faster, slightly lighter, slightly, has more speed, more agility. I think in Tom Aspinall, some of those attributes are a lot closer than he's ever had to face before. And that's why, as the fans, as the media, and now the UFC brass and Dana White, Hunter, Sean Shelby, everybody knows this is the next fight. And I believe it could be top 10 biggest fights in UFC history. I really think it's that big. And I think for Jon, in terms of, his motivations being for legacy, and obviously he wants that big payday, this is a huge fight for his legacy. That cements everything. I think after that fight, he should genuinely walk away. I think he has nothing else to prove at that point. And I get the argument that some people say, oh, there'll always be a next guy. Well, I don't believe that in this case. I think Tom Aspinall is different because he offers something that we've never seen Jon fight before. People like to say, they used to say Johnny Walker was the next guy for Jon Jones, which they did. They said, Dominic Reyes was the next guy, and he gave him a competitive fight. They said Thiago Santos, or when he was going through that end of his tenure at light heavyweight, that, then this is the next guy to beat Jon Jones. Well, Tom Aspinall is different to all of that. It does happen with superstars and champions that they're going to want to watch you lose. I'm not coming from that perspective, and for any Jon Jones supporter, or even Jon Jones himself and his team, or anybody watching this podcast or listening right now, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying we need Jon to fight the best of the best of the best until he loses. I don't think Jon necessarily loses this fight. I just believe that Tom Aspinall offers the biggest threat to Jon we've ever seen in terms of all the attributes I just went through. For Tom Aspinall, this is obviously a huge legacy fight because he's ran through the entire heavyweight division. And we're going to get now to the fan conduct, debate, language, all of those things. So in my last podcast, I obviously spoke about this topic in episode 5 of the Backseat Fighter. A great episode, great interview with Joshua Flash on Wardy. So many appreciative feelings right now going through when I think about him doing that interview with me. It was so nice of him, and he gave me such good insight into the life of being a fighter. I implore everybody to go watch that right now. But in that podcast, in episode 5, I selected a clip and I uploaded it to TikTok, and it was basically about the fact that Jon Jones kind of needs to fight Tom Aspinall at heavyweight because he still needs to prove some things at heavyweight. He doesn't need to fight Tom Aspinall in terms of his career, in terms of wanting to retire, in terms of money, in terms of any of this other stuff. I'm just saying purely to prove that he can be the heavyweight GOAT. I think that's what's at stake for Jon Jones. If he beats Tom Aspinall, he can be the heavyweight GOAT as well as, you know, the overall GOAT. Because right now I still think some people think Stipe retains that and that title, or, you know, some people think that Fedor or, you know, whoever it is, whoever you guys want to believe is the greatest of all time at heavyweight. But that's not the debate. Let me get back to the point. So in the comments of that TikTok post, I saw a lot of the debate. I got, I think, about 51 comments as of today, Thursday, the 21st of November, on that post of people going back and forth about, you know, whether Tom should fight Jon. I love debate. I want the fans to be engaged. I want people to view my content as a platform to start healthy discussion and help grow the sport. That's all I'm here for. But in those comments, I saw a lot of conduct that, you know, a lot of it's quite funny, but I also don't think it's necessarily productive. Now, I saw a lot of the term casual, calling each other casuals. Now, that is a term, if people don't know, in at least in the MMA spaces and in wider sports more generally, that people use to kind of insult someone else for their lack of knowledge. So somebody says something and you disagree with them or you believe it's misinformed, you just call them a casual and you write them off. Well, I saw a lot of that in the comments when, you know, somebody said, you know, that Tom Aspinall has fought completely nobodies, which I disagree with as a statement. Somebody said Tom Aspinall has fought nobodies. He's beaten nobodies. And somebody replied to that and said, well, he's beat, you know, a lot of the top 10 guys. He's got the average fight time in UFC history. He's knocked out everybody. He's defended the interim championship. He beat Sergey Pavlovich for that interim championship and defended it against one of the most respected heavyweights in Curtis Blades. And, you know, proceeded to call that person a casual for that take. And it kind of started this back and forth that ranged, you know, 20, 25 comments of calling each other casuals or calling each other's silly or misinformed or stupid or dumb, and things like that. And I don't listen. That's how we speak. You know, that's how people speak when they're not on a podcast. I don't try to do that. I try to be very respectful of fighting. It's something it's something I care so much about to the point where I refuse to engage in language like that at this point. But I understand a lot of the fans communicate like that. And a lot of their ideas I agree with. A lot of their opinions I agree with. But I just believe we need to be communicating better to each other and not just calling somebody out as a casual when they don't necessarily understand something, a detail that only somebody who watches a lot of the sport would understand, right? Because MMA, relative to basketball, NFL, you know, football, and you know, all of these other sports, major leagues, is a very, very young sport. MMA is young in the game. The UFC has been around for, I believe, 31 years, maybe 32 years maximum. So when we're talking about a fan base, we should be educating each other. We should not be just writing each other off as casuals or calling each other dumb or stupid in the comments. But I do love the fact that you guys were engaging with what I'm saying. And I do believe that, you know, this is an important issue to talk about, especially in terms of the Tom Aspinall, Jon Jones debate, because, you know, it's the first piece of content I've put out on TikTok where I've received that many comments. So it's something people really, really care about. It's something that I understand fans are very passionate about, because I'm very passionate about this fight happening. You know, this podcast is about addressing where these thoughts come from. Can I acknowledge my own biases? Can I acknowledge the fact that I'm not a fighter? Can I look at fighters from a humane perspective and from a humble perspective to say, you know what, I respect you inherently for what you do, for the sacrifices you make. Now, when I'm challenging my own biases in this situation, obviously I'm a big fan of Tom Aspinall. Firstly, because of his amazing fight style. I love his knockout performances, the way he approaches fights, the fact that he came off a 2-week short notice or less, injured back, knocks out Sergey Pavlovich in MSG. But it's more than that. Obviously, he's English. He's from Manchester. I'm from London. He's from up north. But You know, it's a huge reason why I'm a big fan of him. I want to see people from my country do well, as I do all people, all places. But I also have seen Tom Aspinall fight before. And I saw him fight in a very, very precarious circumstance. I saw him fight live in the O2 Arena the first time he fought Curtis Blades. And that's when he blew out his knee. And I feel very emotional about that moment because I think that was my first UFC event, I believe. And when he hurt his knee 15 seconds into that fight, everybody started pouring out of the arena as soon as he hit the canvas. And I remember sitting there with my brother saying, "No, we're not leaving yet," because he was writhing in pain and the entire arena emptied around him. And I thought there was something scarily or eerily inhumane or robotic or I don't know what the word is, just eerily unemotional about the whole relationship in that moment between fan and fighter. You know, this man is putting himself on the line. You know, he revealed later that he had knee injuries or knee problems coming into that fight, but he has just experienced a tremendously traumatic thing in his professional life that in that moment, he's just lost the fight in front of a lot of people. He doesn't know how long that's going to take to recover, and he doesn't know if he'll ever be the same again. So all of these things will be going through his head. I've had injuries, obviously not in the professional level like that, and I know those are the things that go through your head. But in that moment, the whole arena empties out, and I just remember looking at the octagon in the middle of the O2, you see Tom Aspinall lying there, and you just think, wow, the fickleness of all of this. I get it. There's traffic. Getting home on the tube after a show at the O2 is busy. It takes forever. It's not nice. It's not comfortable. But as soon as it was over, everybody emptied. And I thought, wow, you know, that's where all of this, for me, is partially rooted in, is that connection I felt to Tom Aspinall in that moment, and to see him come back from that, to then go on to dominate guys, to then be the interim champion, to then defend that interim championship, and now be on the cusp of fighting the greatest of all time in our sport. At least what most people believe is the greatest of all time in our sport. And I will say our sport, even though I really like to preach that it's the fighter's sport, I do believe that as media, as fans, and especially what I'm trying to build on this platform in terms of a more holistic, more analytical, and kind of humane connection between media and fighter, or fan and fighter, I want to build a space where it does become all of ours. Now, that's another debate for another time. I think I've spoken about it on previous episodes, that I'm not trying to say that Tom Aspinall win is my win, because all credit goes to Tom and his team and his dad and everyone that works with him for those performances and wins. But before I get too off the path and start talking about something completely different and go on another rant, that's where my bias comes from, where I can acknowledge that. And that's why I partially believe that Tom Aspinall deserves this fight, to see his journey. But all of those other things are relevant too. I just don't want the comments to necessarily go to that place. I get it's a part of joking around, the barbershop talk with your buddies. You know, we all do that. We all talk about sports with our friends casually, and I get that. But I want this platform, and I want fans to be as involved, if not more involved than they already have been, in helping me build this platform. I also put a poll out on TikTok to see, you know, I put a poll out on TikTok to see, you know, who thinks that Jon Jones needs to fight Tom Aspinall. And as of this moment, it was 66% of people said he definitely needs to, and 33% of people said he doesn't need to. So the majority of the MMA fan base, at least on this platform, do believe that Jon Jones needs to fight Tom Aspinall. And I just wanted to go through a little bit about how I don't think fans should be calling each other casuals if they disagree with each other. And I also don't want us to be afraid to talk to each other in that sense, because we need to come to an agreement, or come to not even agreement. We can disagree healthily with each other and understand where each other are coming from. And I hope that this platform serves that basis where we can all come together and talk about things like this. How do I feel? Jon, if you have, I feel like Jon, if he has, more aspirations at heavyweight, that fight needs to come against Tom Aspinall. And if he's going to stay around in the sport, that's the fight we need to see. But if he were to retire today, I would have no problem with that. He's one of the greatest to ever do it in our sport. He could walk away with nothing to prove right now, and I would have no problem with that. But I don't want to see, as a fan and as media and as somebody who still believes in the remnants of meritocracy in the UFC, Jon Jones not fight Tom Aspinall if he's going to stick around in our sport. I don't want to see him fight Alex Pereira yet. I think that's an interesting fight. I don't want to see him fight, any other light heavyweights. I want to see him at heavyweight against the best heavyweight in my belief in the sport right now, in Tom Aspinall. So let's get into this main event right here. Deiveson Figueiredo versus Petr Yan. Obviously, Petr Yan comes out on top with the dominant unanimous decision victory. But, although it was 50-45 unanimous, I believe, so the judges gave Petr Yan every single round, it was a quite competitive fight, to be honest, and a super technical performance by both elite fighters. I mean, these guys came in to this fight as former champions, ready to battle it out for a number one contender spot in that bantamweight division. And, I did have a previous episode 6 that I recorded where I predicted this fight. I had some technical difficulties, so we couldn't upload that, unfortunately. But in that podcast and in what was supposed to be this episode, I said that Deiveson Figueiredo would come out on top on that fight. And I knew he was a betting underdog going into it. And I had all of the utmost respect for Petr Yan. I, in fact, spent about 15 to 20 minutes analyzing the fight. And 15 of those minutes were discussing how good I thought Petr Yan was, but how I thought, Deiveson Figueiredo could exploit some of the weaknesses we've seen in Petr Yan's game, which is a ridiculous, almost absurd thing to say considering how well-rounded Petr Yan is, and he showed it in that fight. Let me start with Deiveson Figueiredo. I thought, coming into this fight, his game plan would be to threaten the takedown early or land a significant takedown early and hold Petr Yan down so that for the rest of the fight, he could threaten the level change and go up top and find success on the feet. Now, he did a great job in the first round of landing that takedown and holding down Petr Yan. And Petr Yan, even against Merab, although he got taken down a bunch, he showed immense ability to get up. His grappling, his defense on the ground is amazing. And, he showed that. But I thought Deiveson obviously implemented that throughout the takedown so early that it was going to go to plan for him. But Petr Yan, he just builds as the fight goes. I said in my predictions, he's a supercomputer who just analyzes data. On that first round, you might have success against him, but your chances of success go down and down and down as 2, 3, 4, and 5 arrive. And I just thought he showed an amazing performance in this fight. Now, the left hooks to the body of Deiveson Figueiredo, I thought, his trips, there's a viral trip that he landed going round, perfect Muay Thai from him. And I think he trains a lot at Tiger Muay Thai there in Thailand. And it shows in his fights because he's so technically sound and his boxing is so defensively minded in terms of his ability to catch shots on the glove and throw straight off his opponent's attacks. Every time Figgy would kind of go for something, Peter would either, catch it, parry the shot, and come with that lead uppercut that landed so many times. I was surprised that Deiveson Figueiredo was able to take that much damage and just keep pressing on. Of course, Petr Yan did a great job with the kicks to the body attacks, changing up the levels, switching stances, as I spoke about my predictions. He's so good at flowing his attack into different stances that it doesn't really give the opponent time to frame away, circle off, and kind of calibrate themselves for their own attack. He just doesn't give the space or the rhythm. He doesn't go, bap, 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 my turn, your turn. That's not Petr Yan's style. Petr Yan's style is very much control the rhythm, switch stance so you can't circle out. Whichever way you go, he's able to fight out of that position. Whether you circle to his left shoulder, he can switch into the orthodox stance. And if obviously you circle to the right, he's already in his, I would say, main stance of being a southpaw. But he shows such good ability and such defensive awareness to not get hit with anything big. That being said, Deiveson Figueiredo in that fourth round did drop Petr Yan. I know the judges didn't score it as a knockdown for some reason. I don't understand why. I think Deiveson fired a perfect right hand straight down the pipe. put Peter Yan on his bum, and I think in the post-fight interview, Peter Yan said, I thought it was New Year's for a second. There was fireworks going off, something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but an amazing fight between those two, and I did think Figueiredo was going to be able to win. I thought Figueiredo was going to be able to obviously get that takedown, which he did, but use that takedown to threaten attacks, to land big shots, and I just thought his grappling, to be honest, I thought he'd be able to get on Peter Yan's back and threaten a submission and win the rounds that way by controlling him. And I did know that Peter Yan's ability to get up is something so relevant and such powerful factor in his game, because he's so dominant and technical on the feet, and he's so technically gifted when he's getting taken down to reverse positions. He throws up such good hooks into reverse. He uses his knees and his legs to use that as leverage to sweep and reverse positions back up to his feet. And I think Davison was a bit shocked about how good his grappling defense was. I think in his pre-fight interview with, Michael Bisping or the commentators, Davison Figueiredo thought it would be easy. He thought he'd be able to dominate Peter on the ground. And I never thought it'd be like a pure domination, but I did think that Figueiredo would have more success on the ground than he did. But the pace of the fight was insane. The fact that it went 5 rounds, they never slowed down, and Figueiredo, he looked great, to be honest. And Peter Yan beat a very good Figueiredo, a fully healthy Figueiredo, although he somehow still looked drained on the scale, even at 135. But for Figueiredo to come up to this division, have such success as he's had, and then, although it was a 50-45 decision, I don't think anybody felt that Davison Figueiredo was out of his depth in there with Peter Yan. I think there's still a bunch of options for Figueiredo. And now for Yan, the question becomes, does he become that number one contender? Is he next for the title shot? I know Merab Dvalishvili, the champion of that division, who's kind of showed a little bit of hesitancy or preference in not wanting to fight Umar Nurmagomedov, who's coming off a great win against Corey Sandhagen. Shout out to Corey Sandhagen, met him here in Central Park. And that was a great performance by Umar, because his ability to be a very, very good Corey Sandhagen that night, who kind of defended all of the grappling that Umar had to offer, and then Umar was able to win on the feet in the striking department. I think Umar is the rightful number one contender, but I think it's Ramadan now, or we're entering Ramadan for when the fight, Merab is next going to fight, which I believe is in March. So Umar's probably not going to fight Merab next. And you know what? Merab has kind of shown a hesitancy to fight Umar. I think he realizes that Umar, from his background as part of that Khabib Nurmagomedov team, as being one of those undefeated Dagestani fighters who's on an absolute tear right now. They've got the mentality, they've got the training, they've got the grappling base, obviously. But Umar, similar to Islam Makhachev, is kind of the next evolution in that family of striking, and they're bringing it all together over there. So they are a threat to every division, and I think Merab recognizes that threat and would prefer, obviously, a fight against Peter Yan, a rematch of when Merab attempted 49 takedowns against Peter Yan and just basically was able to just control the fight, but with his pressure, with his grappling pressure, and in classic Merab fashion, just step on the pedal, keep on the cardio, and basically win that fight dominantly. Now, I personally, if I was Peter Yan, I would just somehow hope that Umar Nurmagomedov would fight Merab first, because I think, I believe at least, that Umar Nurmagomedov probably comes out on top in that fight. And then we get Peter Yan versus Umar. But I believe, because I think that's a favorable matchup for Peter. I think Peter can win on the feet. Piotr, sorry. He can win on the feet in that fight against Umar. And, the grappling, just the consistent chain wrestling, the amount of takedowns that Merab is going to offer in a fight against Yan, it's just the worst style matchup for Yan. And I'm sure he believes himself. I'm sure he believes he can beat Merab Dvalishvili. But we'll see what's going to happen. I believe now that he is the number one contender after Umar Nurmagomedov. But if Umar isn't going to fight in that period, he's obviously going to jump the line there and face off against Merab Dvalishvili for a rematch, but this time for the title. I think the bantamweight division is probably my favorite division as a fan in terms of just a pure skill, pace, and the knockout killers and all the killers that you have. You've got Sean O'Malley, Umar Nurmagomedov, Corey Sandhagen, Dominic Cruz, Chito Vera, Merab Dvalishvili, Aljamain Sterling, although he's moved up to featherweight. It's a killer of a division. TJ Dillashaw before he was forced into retirement through injury. So it's a weight class that just produces the best of the best. You know, you had obviously got you've got Demetrius Johnson was there, Henry Cejudo. I mean, it doesn't end. You know, it's an insanely talented division, and yeah, such exciting times ahead. But I believe, you know, that was just a vintage Piotr Jan performance with the hands, the amazing uppercut, amazing shots of the body, switching stances, and you know, I think he showed an immense ability and kind of an even better version of his grappling defense and ability to get up, and that's what won in that fight, in my opinion. For Davis and Figueiredo, I think there's a lot of matchups that are interesting, and I think he'll be excited to keep going. But respect to both of those guys, two of the most entertaining fighters in the UFC, two former champions and absolute elite fighters. But let me move on now to the co-main event, which was Yan Xionan versus Tabitha Ricci. I mean, this fight played out exactly how I said it would in my predictions. If I can, I'll back catalog that episode or just those predictions. I'll put them in a TikTok or something to prove that I'm not lying when I talk about this. Well, I already out myself that I got the main event wrong, so it doesn't really matter anyway. You know I'm telling the truth. But, you know, Yan Xionan, in doing a lot of tape study for this fight, for both of these fighters, Yan Xionan and Tabitha Ricci, I just believe that Yan Xionan was just too technical on the feet, and Tabitha Ricci, with her new team Ricci, I think her main coach is a boxing coach. They've been working a lot on the hands. I didn't believe that she had enough tools to compete with Yan Xionan on the feet, and what Yan Xionan showed is an amazing ability to counterpunch, put under pressure. But that specific weapon that I talked about, that side kick, that lead side kick that she can throw to the leg, that she can throw to the body, that she can throw to the head, it's such a deterrent for any fight. They can't close the range on Yan Xionan because of that weapon. And she showed such great range control, such ability, which proves why she's one of the elite fighters in this women's strawweight division and why she challenged Zhang Weili for the title. I think she's probably put herself back in the title picture here with a great win over Tabitha Ricci in this co-main event. And, you know, I thought Ricci showed great heart, you know, to keep going, to keep pressing on, and especially in that final round, to not slow down and to keep going for the win, even though she was down on the scorecards. I think Tabitha Ricci has a lot of potential to come back here. I don't think this is an end by any means. I think she showed improvement on the feet. And, you know, in that fight, she did throw some head kicks, I believe. She started throwing the head kick and it was successful, but she just didn't throw it enough. And I think even Bisping and Laura Sanko were calling for her to keep throwing that high kick because it was having success. And it was, you know, when you find a weapon in a fight, I don't know this as a guy, a journalist sitting in his room, in his studio, but I would imagine that if you're a fighter in that moment, you're down, you just throw whatever is working, especially in an urgent situation like that. But yes, I would advise Ricci, if I was her team, to keep working, and the progress she's made is obviously showing. But Yan Xiaonan just looked like an elite striker that night, and I think there was a few people in the world in that division that could probably have beaten Yan Xiaonan. She just looked on, everything was landing, such good variation from the body to the legs, and obviously that lead side kick that is just a vicious weapon of hers that she's perfected, was just threatening Tabitha Ricci the whole time. But let me get into the next fight in the card. That was a great fight between those two women. But let's get into this fight, this welterweight matchup. Now, in my predictions, I was quite torn on this. I thought that Song Kenan had shown such good, flashes of brilliance inside the UFC. He's been in the UFC since 2017. He's obviously the hometown hero coming into this fight, you know, fighting in his own country of China. And, you know, he's shown great ability. I mean, he's got huge legs. His ability to take damage on his legs is great. He's got a great base, strong base, can throw good leg kicks of his own and good body kicks, and has great hands. I mean, he dropped Ian Machado Gary, right? So this is a fighter who's been in there with the best and has success against the guy who is now fighting in the number one contenders matchup in this welterweight division. So I was high on him. But then I also looked at a lot of Muslim Salikhov's fights, and he just looked like a very, very good striker. So comfortable on the feet, great left hook, great right hand. And he's called the king of Kung Fu for a reason, because he wins this fight in the first round by spinning wheel kick, connects to the jaw of Song Kenan, puts him out cold. And, you know, I was very torn on this fight. I think I went for Muslim Salikhov, I went for Song Kenan, sorry, in my predictions. But I was very torn, and I saw a pathway for both of these guys to win, but I did not see a spinning wheel kick coming. And at 40 years old, to be doing spinning wheel kicks in a main event in the first round, getting finishes like that, I'm sure it fills him with a wealth of confidence to be able to go on and do more in his career. It's nowhere near over yet for Muslim Salikhov, and with a record of 21-5, he's still got such a big threat in the feet that I'm sure the UFC are now willing to put him on bigger cards and bigger matchups and see if he can do that to more higher ranked opponents. And I just think both of these guys should be proud of themselves, but mostly Muslim Salikhov. What a performance at 40 years old. I think that's his second wheel kick KO, I believe. And it shows, the technique was perfect. He was winning the exchanges on the feet, I believe, but I remember he kind of frames off, lets Song Kenan kind of come into that half space, steps back, wheel kicks, heel lands perfectly on the jaw, and that was it. It was over. But what a fight between those guys, and a big fan. I'm a big fan of Muslim Salikhov. Now that I've fully watched one of his fights, I obviously went back into tape study, but to see it live in that moment, what a performance. I'm going to go down now to the first fight of the main card because I was most excited for this fight, and then I'll come back and explain the other two. Mingyang versus Ozzy Diaz. This was one in my predictions that I got super deep into tape study and research for, because obviously Mingyang came in and knocked out Brenton Hibero in that amazing knockout. I think it was at UFC 298. And then Ozzy Diaz, who had come in to fight Joe Pyfer on the Contender Series, but he was a championship. Let me get back to what I'm saying. Ozzy Diaz was a champion at middleweight in LFA. He comes in on Dana White Contender Series, fights Joe Pyfer, gets knocked out. And I said in my predictions, there is nothing to be ashamed about being knocked out by Joe Pyfer. This is a guy who unofficially has the hardest punch in UFC history, right? But he goes back to LFA. He moves up to light heavyweight after this knockout loss to Joe Pyfer, and gets himself a shot back in the UFC in a bigger weight class. Now, I looked at Mingyang's record. I think he's now 18-6, I believe. But I don't remember exactly what stat I had. I have my cards and my research here. I think he was 12-1 in his last 13, something to that effect. And all by finish, all by KO. Let me see. Yes, 12-1 in his last 13, all by knockout. So I knew this guy was an elite finisher, and he had proven it against Brenton Hibero, who's a great striker. He had that kind of weird, sloppy fight against Chalo or something like that. Sorry, on the card with Moreno and Albazi. And that was kind of a weird fight. It was a bit messy. There wasn't too much activity, not too much to score in terms of who was winning that fight. But I knew that Brenton Hibero was a good striker, who's long, who's lengthy, he's got good power, good extension, rotation on his punches. So for him to come out in his UFC debut and knock out Brenton Hibero, I was so excited for this performance against Ozzy Diaz. And, I did believe that Ozzy Diaz had a chance, especially moving up in weight. I think he's more comfortable at light heavyweight, or I thought so at least. But Mingyang, the way he wins this fight, they're exchanging, lands beautiful shots, and he steps in with a lead elbow to the jaw of Ozzy Diaz, and Ozzy Diaz just drops to the floor. Mingyang comes in for the ground and pound, and that's 2 first-round knockouts, I believe, in the UFC for Mingyang, and this is a real finisher. And at light heavyweight, he's a real threat to a lot of the other guys in the division. What I noticed about Mingyang is his eyes are very good. He did a lot of fakes. He's looking at his opponent. He's looking down at the feet before he goes high. He's looking up top before he goes low. And just those small, intricate nuances that I've noticed as a fan, as part of media, as someone who's really trying to analyze these fights, those are the differences between elite strikers and very good strikers, is those small details. Can you fire off rhythm shots? Can you fake with the eyes and go low? Can you make your opponent think you're going to do something and then fire a shot that they don't see? Sometimes the knockout shots are not the hardest swinging shots that a fighter throws. It's a shot that the fighter doesn't expect. If they're blocking one way and a hook comes and hits them when they didn't expect it, they might go down just purely of the fact that their body wasn't ready, or their posture, their positioning wasn't ready to absorb that shot. And now Ozzy Diaz, this is a guy who I don't think should be cut in the UFC, shouldn't be written off. I think we're going to see Mingyang escalate up the rankings, and then this loss on Ozzy Diaz's record is not going to look that bad in the future. We're going to look back and be like, wow, Ozzy Diaz fought a killer in his UFC debut. For Ozzy Diaz, he looked... obviously the move to light heavyweight was successful. He got 2 wins after the Joe Pyfer loss and achieved his UFC debut in the light heavyweight division. So I'm not telling him what to do, and nor do I have the ability, stance, or insight, or even experience to tell him what weight division he should feel more comfortable at. But Mingyang did look like the bigger guy, a solid, lean 205er, whereas Ozzy Diaz did look like he was carrying a little bit of extra weight there. And I wonder if he was having trouble cutting to 185 before, or if he feels like he could take a better shot at 205. So that's for Ozzy Diaz to decide. Ozzy Diaz is also a great finisher of fights. I mean, he's got knockouts of his own. I think he was on a 5-fight knockout streak before this fight. So Ozzy Diaz is a serious fighter, and I hope we get to see him again in the UFC. And what an amazing fight. What an amazing technique by Mingyang. And, we don't see too many step-in elbows, KOs anymore, but that was a great shot by Mingyang. And I was very happy I woke up early at 6 a.m. to watch that fight. Now let's move back to a bit higher up in the main card. Wang Cong versus Gabriela Fernandes. I believed in Wang Cong to get this done, and she gets submitted in round 2. I think Gabriela Fernandes shocked a lot of people because I definitely saw Wang Cong winning the exchanges on the feet. I thought she does such a good job of throwing clean strikes with good defense in regard to when she throws a jab, her right hand's in the right place. When she throws the cross, that lead jab hand is returned. But in this fight, Gabriela Fernandes was able to land big shots. And I know she won by submission, but if anybody watched the fight, the way she set up that submission was with an immense head kick that rocked Wang Cong. And Wang Cong gets straight up again and starts fighting, showed great heart to just get up and keep going forward. But it was probably ill-advised, because then what happens is Gabriela Fernandes, I think it's a straight left, knocks down Wang Cong again, and this time there wasn't too much recovery there, and Gabriela Fernandes does such a great job to instantly jump on the back, put both hooks in, turn Wang Cong to the mat, flatten her out, and just start cinching in that rear naked choke that ultimately finished the fight and put Wang Cong out cold. And for such a big hype train, for such a good character, the Joker Wang Cong, to be upset like that in China, in Macau, I think Gabriela Fernandez's star power goes up, and that's probably one of the biggest wins of her career. I just thought that Wang Cong would have the edge in the striking department, and Gabriela Fernandes shut the entire world up. Her celebration showed that she knew she was an underdog, and I think sometimes being the underdog might be easier, because if you have all of that pressure as you're this undefeated fighter, you're fighting at home, your UFC debut, you knocked your opponent out inside 1 minute, it can be hard to live up to that expectation. And, for both of these fighters, I don't think this is, for Wang Cong, I don't think this is the end of the road. I think she's still got a great brand. She's got a great character in the Joker. She comes up to the weigh-ins in the full Joker makeup. And for Gabriela Fernandes, I believe that, this is a big boost to her career, and she's shown that she's a real serious fighter. Unfortunately, the only fight I missed on the night on the morning here, was Volkan Ozdemir versus Carlos Ulberg. And it really pains me to say that, because I was so excited to watch this fight. With Carlos Ulberg, I mean, I knew this was a big test for him coming in to fight a guy like Volkan, who's coming off one of the most vicious knockouts I've ever seen in that performance against Johnny Walker. And I went through a lot of my predictions. I had a bunch of analysis, and for me to miss this fight due to technical difficulties, I also stopped the upload. I mean, it was a mess. It was not nice, but I knew that I thought Carlos Ulberg was going to win in this fight, just because his ability, in my predictions, I said his ability to throw multiple shots out of the same position, his ability to fire out 3 or 4 or 5 jabs while circling out, always having a threat to his opponent, and just the fact that he's on such a big finishing streak at the moment. It was a really, really, really good performance from what I've heard. And his ability to overcome a test like Volkan Ozdemir in, such a big card at this point in his career. I wasn't surprised when I, was able to get my account back working and to see the result. I really believe that coming from that City kickboxing team, they just have a formula, especially when fights are on the feet. They have a formula about how to fire offbeat rhythm shots and, end up winning against these elite fighters. I mean, this is the team with Volkanovski, Izzy, Dan Hooker, Kai Kara France, all of these guys that are amazing strikers. Coming to this fight, obviously Carlos Ulberg had a lot of cancelled bouts, and for him to come in now just looking fresh as ever, looking ready to go, it showed me a lot. And obviously he'd come off that 12-second knockout win against Alonzo Menefield. So for him to now get a big veteran name on his record, on his resume, I think he's now probably looking up at the rankings thinking, this is it. Like, I need a top 5 guy now. He probably should be fighting the Jamal Hills of the world, the Yuri Prohaskas of the world, even though those two are matched up. I think we're going to start seeing him climb those rankings. And, he was, supposed to fight Anthony Smith. He was supposed to fight Jamal Hill, I believe, before that got cancelled. So he deserves to be up there with the best of them. And I'm sure we're going to see Carlos Ulberg in the title picture soon because of just his finishing ability. And now he's shown his ability to beat a veteran. And for Volkan, he's obviously one of these guys that's been in there with the best of them. He's been in there now with Carlos Ulberg. He went in there with Ankalaev. He beat Rakic, I believe. He's been in there with Yuri Prohaska, Paul Craig. So this is a guy that's going to fight the best of the best. I don't think it's over for Volkan by any means in terms of what his career looks like as a successful light heavyweight. And, I do believe that both of these guys are still elite fighters in terms of, obviously Carlos Ulberg, but Volkan is still an elite fighter and it's still a hard challenge for anybody, and such an impressive win for Carlos Ulberg on his career. But I don't want to lie and say that I can offer the best analysis of that fight when it's literally the fight I missed on the card. But in UFC Macau, what an amazing event that was. And, I think for US fans, it's probably a foreign concept to wake up so early for fights. But as a Brit, we've been doing that for years and years and years. So, amazing fight and just delivered. Amazing 5-round fight in terms of the main event. Great technical display by Xionan and Hart, shown by Ricci in the co-main. Knockout in the fight between Salikhov and Kenan. And then Wang Kong submission. Volkan, Carlos Ulberg, I heard it was a great fight. And obviously the Zhang Mingyang knockout with the elbow. I just quickly want to mention Ming Shi. I think she's a star. She obviously won her road to the UFC fight against Feng Xiaokan. And, this was an absolute... Oh, no. Is that? Yes. Yeah, sorry. And, what an absolute head kick from hell that she landed. And, I think she's going to be a superstar. And we're praying, obviously, for the fighter who was sent to the hospital in the head brace. So, all around great card. I think there was, so many KOs. There was great decisions. And I think a fight card for the fans for sure. And, thank you guys so much for all the support recently on the channel. The TikTok has been doing so well, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and a lot of that goes down to Joshua Flash and Woody, who I had on the show. Let me know which fighters you want on the podcast next, because we've got a lot more to come. We're going to be doing stuff about brain health, about, gyms that are helping people with Parkinson's disease, doctors. We're going to have the entire fight on this podcast, because this podcast is not only about talking about these great UFC fights and talking about debates in the UFC space between fans and media, but it's about uplifting fighters. It's about talking about the things that really matter, the sacrifices they make, the consequences of fighting. How does that affect brain health? What are people doing in terms of martial arts that are helping people who've never been fighters but maybe have Parkinson's disease, or maybe have some degenerative neurological disease that's being helped or supplemented through training. So this is a huge honor for me to be doing this podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go subscribe right now down below and turn on the notification bell for all new episodes. We've got clips coming out that separate the podcast. And also go follow my TikTok for all the best clips and highlights from the show. Same with Instagram Reels. And of course, check on my Twitter for any thoughts and clips I have over there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time for episode 7 of the Backseat Fighter podcast.